please, whatever you do, do not vote for Donald Trump in the fall, please. God. Oh my God, there are very few worse decisions in the world than to do that, but please, I'm begging you, not that, I really hope that none of you guys are actually thinking about it, but please, God, do not vote for that man in the fall. Alright, so hello everyone, welcome to another beautiful Thursday. Today we'll be talking about something, somewhat of a Twitter trend that happened a couple months ago, if I remember correctly. And it was basically just to just tweet out 4 songs that you, as a person, would not, quote, exist without. So essentially the way I interpret it was 4 albums that really defined my musical taste now. And when I saw this tweet originally and I responded to it with my own 4, the 4 that I put were Yeezus by Kanye West, Magna, Carta, Holy Grail by Jay-Z, Trap Soul by Bryson Tiller, and oh gosh, this Sabrina Claudio album, which I'm forgetting the title of at the moment, but it doesn't even matter. Those 4 that I picked, I kind of picked those very quickly. Those are just the 4 off the top of my head. And I decided to revisit this idea and actually make a conscious list, a more accurate 4 albums that I think really define my musical taste. And 2 of those albums stayed, but the other 2 dipped out and were replaced by 2 other ones. And then I decided to put a honorable mention 5th one, which I will talk about at the very end. But just to go over the 4 that I'll be talking about today, the 4 albums, again, that I think that I would believe had the biggest influence on my musical taste today, the 4 being Bangarang by Skrillex, Magna Carta Holy Grail by Jay-Z, Yeezus by Kanye West, and then Control by SZA. With the honorable mention being The Fame Monster by Lady Gaga. Alright, so let's just jump into it because I have a lot to say about these albums. They're all really amazing to me, all 5 of these. So I could really talk for hours about each one of them, but I'm going to try and stay pretty concise here just for the sake of not boring you guys to death talking about one specific album for hours and hours and hours. So just to start out, these are kind of, the way I arranged this, it kind of ended up being chronological in terms of release, but it also kind of makes sense. At least the first 3 kind of make sense in the order I described them. So I'm starting out with Bangarang by Skrillex. Anyone who doesn't know what this album is or who Skrillex is, Skrillex gained most of his popularity, or I should say mainstream popularity, as a dubstep producer back in early 2010s when dubstep was really prominent. And this album was released in 2011, and it was his second EP, which followed his first EP being Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, which debatably has a little bit more novelty to it as a dubstep album, but to me Bangarang is more socially pertinent, and I think a lot more people would know songs off this album. And to me, this is the album that I listened to the most. Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites had a couple songs on it that I still appreciate to this day, but compared to Bangarang as an album, I think Bangarang is just has more to it than Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites. Anyway, so what I'll be doing with each of these albums, I'll be going through a couple of my favorite songs off it, and then why I think that, or rather how these albums have influenced my musical taste as a whole. So starting off with my favorite songs off the album, obviously the title track, Bangarang. If you haven't heard the song, you kind of should, just to really identify with the sound that was happening in 2011, because it was very in the early 2010s, and actually more in the mid 2010s, a lot of more mainstream artists and a lot of more mainstream songs tended to use, or started to use, more electronic sounds, a lot more. It wouldn't qualify really as dubstep, but a lot of the sounds that you would hear in this album and in these songs, you'll find in a lot of mainstream songs now. And Bangarang is a good example of that, because it's pretty low level. I would say low level dubstep. It's not very heavy. It's not very jarring in terms of sound. It's very easy to get into, and if you're going on like YouTube or something to find it, the music video for it is really weird. In fact, all the music videos for all of Skrillex's songs are pretty weird for the most part, but the song is really fun. You've probably heard it before in some instances. As soon as you turn it on, you'll probably recognize it. And then the second of my favorite songs being Summit featuring Ellie Goulding, which is funny because I kind of shat on Ellie Goulding last episode, but I like this song. I like her when she's in this space and she's just kind of giving her vocals over, just like a really nice, smooth electronic beat. That's really where I appreciate Ellie Goulding as an artist. So this song really embodies that to its fullest, and she and Skrillex do a really nice, smooth song. Honestly, if you're kind of intimidated by dubstep as a genre, this song wouldn't do that. This is a pretty easy song to get into. And so those are two of my favorite songs off that album. So why it made this list. So I had a couple notes for each one of these albums. And for this one, I had that, So dubstep, oddly enough, was a genre that I kind of stumbled upon when I was starting to just kind of go down some YouTube rabbit holes. And I actually found dubstep as a genre because, I don't know, YouTube in its wonderful, mysterious ways kind of put some kind of a dubstep remix. I must have been looking up just like popular songs at the time to listen to, and I put on my homepage a dubstep remix of, oh my gosh, I can't remember the song right now, but a dubstep remix of some popular song that was on the radio, because apparently that was very popular. That was a very popular thing to do at the time, to make dubstep remixes of like bootleg dubstep remixes of just popular songs that are on the radio. And I clicked on it and I liked it. It sounded interesting. And I just kind of, I got sucked into the to the dubstep wormhole. At the time of the album drop, Skrillex is one of the biggest names in the genre, obviously, which is why I picked this album over some other dubstep albums that came out at the time that I was somewhat interested in. And in fact, this album, to my surprise, actually peaked at number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100, which is very interesting. To me, that's very high, because while dubstep definitely had, and electronic music definitely had its day in the 2010s, I never thought that like a full album in that genre would really make it that high. But I was pretty interested to see that. That was just a little note that I had there. Yeah, and in terms of dubstep, the genre, I kind of fell in love, and I'm still really in love with the sound of it. Just like it's crazy, it's urgent, it's really aggressive, the production at least, and especially Skrillex's take on it, which is really, dubstep. It's the genre there's a lot of subgenres obviously to any genre, and especially dubstep music. But he doesn't really he makes what I would call more radio friendly dubstep, where it's not like really loud, it's not really kind of industrial, it's not really bass heavy, but it's still fun to listen to, and it still has a lot of elements that you can find in really any genre of dubstep. And this album as a whole really gave me really gave me an appreciation for creative production, because dubstep music is more often than not just about the production, and if anything else, there are some vocals on top of it, but the vocals don't really lend anything other than just kind of another instrument that the producer plays with, if that makes sense. The lyrics over the lyrics, if there are any on any dubstep song, don't really have that much weight to them. They don't really talk about anything of substance. They're really just there to sound good, if that makes sense. And I really appreciate that kind of creativity in music, in song making. And that sentiment kind of bleeds into the next two albums I'll talk about. The first being Magna, Carta, Holy Grail by Jay-Z. This album was released in 2013, and it is Jay-Z's 12th studio album, which is absolutely insane. He's made so much music, but regardless. And it did a staggering 500,000 sales. It sold 500,000 copies first week, which is fucking insane. It's absolutely insane, especially for it kind of makes sense because this was right before streaming really took off. If you notice, if you take a look at album sales in general, with the exception of a select few being like, like the big names like the Drakes and the Kendricks, and you can throw J. Cole in there, you can probably throw, God, I don't know if I want to throw like Nicki Minaj in there. You can throw like a bunch of people. You can throw Taylor Swift in there. You can throw Bruno Mars, with a very select few exceptions. Streaming or sales, first week sales at least, have gone down dramatically just due to streaming. But that's a little streaming side note. I can talk about that more in depth on a separate episode. But for now, I'll just say that 500,000 sales or copies sold in the first week is absolutely insane for an album, not even like a single. It's just absurd. Some of my favorite songs in the album are Oceans, which has a really awesome Frank Ocean feature on the chorus, which actually I believe this is my first introduction to Frank Ocean. I don't know if it's either this or his part on No Church in the Wild on Jay-Z and Kanye's Watch the Throne album. I can't remember what my first listen of Frank Ocean was, but I want to say it was this. Next song is Summer in America, and then there is also Crown, which has a Travis Scott feature, which is not noted, and I didn't even notice that it was Travis Scott until I was listening through the album when I was driving one day, and I'm listening to the song, and I'm listening to this one part, and I'm listening to the vocals, and I'm like, wait a second. Keep in mind, this is maybe a year ago, and I'm like, wait a second, is that Travis Scott? So I look into like the song credits, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Travis Scott. So keep in mind, this album came out in 2013. I forget what Travis was doing in 2013. I think he was still doing his mixtapes back then, if I'm not mistaken. So, and I was not privy to his mixtapes whatsoever. So this was very much the first time I heard Travis Scott, and for years I just didn't know it was his, which was very funny. His verse wasn't anything incredible, and they pitched it to be, it was just kind of like an odd background verse type deal. It's kind of hard to describe, but go check it out if you want to hear a very premature Travis Scott feature before all the effects and all the superstardom and everything. And then the last song I have noted here is Part 2 on the Run, which is featuring Beyonce, which is a really slow song. And it has some really incredible instrumentals that I can actually say, and that kind of goes into this album as a whole. One of my notes and why I think it's very influential for me is because a lot of Jay-Z's older works are really lyric focused, or really storytelling focused, or really rap focused, right? And obviously production is a very big part of music. Has historically been a very big part of rap as a genre. But this album, to me, compared to Jay-Z's other albums, the production was a lot more fun and a lot more interesting than just like your typical relatively skeletal, sometimes over dramatic beats that Jay-Z tends to rap on. But these Summer in America has one of the most noticeable ones to me, because it starts off with what I believe is a trombone. It has like this weird trombone sounding loop that plays in the background throughout the entire song, and it sounds almost circus like. I'm not sure if that's really quite doing it justice, but it sounds fun. It sounds stupid, and it doesn't sound like anything that Jay-Z would rap over, but obviously he does, and his verses are really fun. Like there's so many quotables in this song especially, and mix like Jay-Z's personality and like this character that he has, that he's built in the music genre. It's just funny, and it clashes with this instrumental, and this goes for a lot of the other instrumentals on a lot of songs here. It clashes, but in a very good way, and it makes it really fun to listen to and very interesting to listen to. Another big reason why I hold this album in such high regard, and for a long time I considered it to be my favorite album of all time before I really started to appreciate Yeezus, which I'll talk about next. But this was realistically this is realistically the first album that I listened to as an album is supposed to be listened to. So straight through, one sitting, and I loved every single song. Or at least I liked every single song. I won't say I absolutely adored every single song, but I liked every single, and I still like every single song off it. Every single song has its merit, and I would say I love about 70% of it, and I like the rest of it a good deal. But this is the first album that really did this for me, where I really appreciated the entire work of art as a whole, and that takes a lot of, I put a lot of stock into that as a listener, and as someone who listens to music like that now. This album being the first album that I really did that, I hold it in a really high regard because of that. And also, this has an odd piece of sentimental value to me, because I remember back in summer when this album came out, it was like the first summer that I was working at, like, I think I was working at my like a Boy Scout camp in the kitchen, and I was like, I was getting paid like relatively real money. So I remember after I got a few paychecks, whatever, the first thing that I bought with earned money, like from an actual job, was a pair of Beats headphones. They were like the first pair of like wireless over-ear Beats headphones. I remember I was so excited because I could finally listen to music, like, quote, as the artist is meant for it to be listened to, whatever Beats tagline is, or was before it got sold. But I remember I was super excited to have these headphones, and the first song that I listened to was the intro of the album, which is called Holy Grail, which is Jay-Z featuring Justin Timberlake of all people. And I remember I listened to that song over and over and over and over again, because at the very beginning of the song, there's this sort of bass drop, if per se, and oh my gosh, that thing sounded incredible in those headphones. And I listened to that thing like constantly, just over and over and over again. And yeah, so that's a really, obviously I still have a completely separate pair. I think I actually still have that pair of Beats somewhere lying around. But obviously I have my new Beats now, and I have my AirPods, and I have a bunch of other stuff, and I have a different way. I have my speakers. I have a whole bunch of different ways to listen to music. But that was the first. This was the first time that I was actually proud of the way I was listening to music, and I was really focusing on how I was listening to music instead of just like through those really crappy Apple headphones that they used to put in the box with the phone. Oh my god, this thing's retarded. Absolutely terrible. Thank God they made them better. But yeah, so that's Magna Carta Holy Grail for you, or for me at least. And then moving on from there, next we have Yeezus, which I really very rarely does a week go by where I don't talk about this album for some reason. But as I said before, many times, this is my favorite album of all time. It is easily my favorite Kanye West album. And despite being, while it is on this list mainly because it's my favorite album of all time, it kind of has, and I'll talk about this in a second, but it has a lot of aspects to it that I really think make up a perfect album for me, and which, the details of which I'm saving for a completely separate episode where I'll detail what makes a perfect album for me, and what makes a perfect, rap album, makes a perfect R&B album. But for me, this right here is one instance of what makes a perfect rap album for me. And I'll go into that in a completely separate episode, because I could, again, spend hours and hours and hours talking about this album. But for now, I'll just stick to the same format that I've been using. So again, this album, I would describe it more of, or most people would describe this album as an experimental hip hop album, and it was released in 2013, which again was the same year that Magna Carta Holy Grail came out. And actually, before I move on, the craziness about 2013 was a crazy year, because and this was the first time that I really recognized that the Grammys are horrible. I'm going to go on a very quick, very, very, very quick Grammy tangent here, / rant. And again, so this is the very first year that I started to recognize that the Grammys are absolutely horrible in terms of actually giving credit to, musical works that deserve the credit. And I want to make sure I don't forget one, but off the top of my head, so obviously, hopefully all you guys know what the Grammys are, so I don't explain much. But in the best rap album of the year that year, the nominees were stacked. Like, this category was absolutely stacked. So the nominees for for best rap album this year were, I always forget one, but it was Yeezus by Kanye West, Magna Carta Holy Grail by Jay-Z. If Nothing Was the Same by Drake, which I'll talk about later, or talk about in a separate episode, but that's I think Drake's best album, but whatever. And there's one more in there, and then there's also The Heist by Macklemore. And some of you, as I started talking about this, probably already knew where I was going to go with this, but alright, so I'm going to just say that there were 4. I know there was a 5th one, which is also insane, but I can't remember what it was for life of me. But it was also, I know that it was also an absolutely amazing album. Wait, was Kendrick's album in there? Okay, I'm going to just talk through this, but essentially, so this entire insanely stacked category list, and oh yeah, that's right. Oh, excuse me. Nope, I'm gonna go back. Jesus. Anyway, so these 4/5 albums in this category, 3 of them being, to me, my favorite albums from their respective artists. And then oh gosh, of all people, Macklemore. Really? Macklemore, I remember Macklemore won that for The Heist. And I don't, to this day, I do not understand how in the hell. I do now, obviously, because, oh my god, the Grammys are trash. At the end of the day, the Grammys are super, super, super trash. So, God, it just makes me mad to this day that all these amazing albums lost to The Heist by Macklemore. Who still listens to that album? If you still listen to that album, I mean, good on you, I guess. But gee, like, really? Are you sure? Like, oh yeah, that's right. I knew there was a Kendrick Lamar album in here. Good Kid, Mad City was also in here. So the nominees again, I'll repeat, just because the gravity of this is insane. So we have Nothing Was the Same by Drake, Drake's best album. Good Kid, Mad City, Kendrick Lamar, his second best album, behind only really To Pimp a Butterfly, and To Pimp a Butterfly is damn near immaculate. So I mean, regardless. Magna Carta Holy Grail by Jay-Z, Yeezus by Kanye West, and then The Heist by Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. And The Heist won that. The Heist won a competition between Drake, Kendrick Lamar, Jay-Z, and Kanye West. Macklemore won that shit. Who listens to this album now? Nobody. Not a single person listens to this album. You can arguably say the same thing about Magna Carta Holy Grail, which is fine. You cannot say the same thing about Yeezus. You can't walk into a damn stadium without hearing Black Skinhead. Good Kid, Mad City is one of the best rap albums of all time. Just widely considered to be. And I mean, it's Drake, right? And that shit loses to Thrift Shop. Ugh, God. The Grammys suck. Don't support the Grammys. Anyway, okay. Grammy rant over. Back to Yeezus. Okay. So, Yeezus is Kanye's 6th solo studio album, and it was also released. And J. Cole's Born Sinner. I'm not a big J. Cole fan, but I mean, I'm friends with a bunch of really huge J. Cole fans. And, anyway, no more Grammys. My favorite songs on this album, in short, all of them, every single one of them. I know it's cheating to say that, but it was hard. I was writing up this list and I was going through the track listing, and I'm looking at all the songs. I'm like, all right, well, I can't write down every song because that's stupid. So I picked my absolute favorites, and I still have 5 of them. 5 of the 10 songs on here. So I have I Am a God, New Slaves, I'm in It, Blood on the Leaves, and Send It Up. And again, like, I mean, Bound 2 is on there. I mean, On Sight, the intro is absolutely incredible. It's one of the best intros ever. And this is from an artist who absolutely kills every intro he's ever done on an album. But every song to me is immaculate on this album. The only one that is a little bit less than that is Black Skinhead, and that's because I hear it at, like I said, I hear it at every damn stadium. You can hear it at every damn stadium you go to. It kind of takes away from the next messaging of the song a lot, but whatever. So again, why I consider this album to be one of my most influential to my music taste. Again, like I said, it's my favorite album of all time period, so it has to be on here. And in terms of Kanye as an artist, it really showed me how creative and interesting of an artist Kanye himself is / was. If you want to subscribe to that thought process where, all Kanye better than new Kanye. I think this is like in the middle. I guess you could still qualify this as old Kanye, but regardless. And it really showed me how creative and interesting rap could be, like, as a genre, because I don't know, I'm used to, at that time I wasn't really listening to a whole lot of music, granted, but a lot of the rap songs I heard essentially sounded very similar, and this was very much a breath of fresh air, despite it sounding nasty as hell. And the album as a whole really combined so many sounds I've never heard in an album before, like the aggressive instrumentals that, again, going back to dubstep, it really, again, this is not a dubstep album. If anything, it's more house, or it's more electronic, and it's, again, I've used the word, and a lot of people like to use the word industrial, and it's very accurate. It's very grimy, it's very, like, raw, it's very in your face, and I've never heard those sounds on an album before, especially not on a rap album. So that was really, really interesting to me and really fascinating for me to listen to the first way through. To this day, I still listen to it all the way through, and I'm like, this album is special. This album is so different. It's ahead of its time, which is a very cliche thing to say about an album especially an experimental album, but this album is somehow still, 7 years later, is still ahead of its time. So far ahead of its time that if Kanye releases an album that sounds like this again, it kind of proves that point. But even further, to me, this album is a staple manifestation of Kanye West at his fullest, at his most destructive, at his most artistic, to me. I mean, this is like Kanye on display. It's just narcissism, creativity, like insanely critical of the reception of black people in America and industry, not only the music industry and the fashion industry, which he just started to get into at this time. It is overtly sexual at times. It is just, again, it's really in your face. It's really, it's the perfect example of what Kanye is. The only thing that it's missing, you could argue, is perfectionism. I would argue that this album has one of his best displays of perfectionism, even more so than My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which a lot of people would say is which is a good display of Kanye's perfectionism, but that's the argument for a separate day. But yeah, again, this is one of my favorite albums of all time, and leaving it off, I'm not doing it nearly enough justice just talking about it in this format. But again, I don't want to bore you guys talking about this album unless the episode is dedicated to that, and I don't want to hold you guys for too long, and we have 2 more albums to talk about. And the fourth and final one of this little influential series, I have Control by SZA. Control spelled CRTL by anyone who's not sure. So this is an R&B album. SZA is an R&B artist. SZA spelled SCA, by the way. This was her debut album. It was released in 2017. And actually, this is the only album that I listen to this day, and probably the only album that I know the exact release date of. Like, I just have it committed to memory. And I didn't even have to look it up before I put in my notes, but it was released on June 9th of 2017. So the Friday being June 9th. And I remember this exact date. It's gonna get a little corny and a little sappy, so listen up or shut your ears if you're not if you don't want to listen to this. But I remember this date because I remember listening to this album when I was driving over to my girlfriend's house to celebrate our 1 year anniversary. And again, it's it's really corny, and it's funny because if you listen to the album, it's very much not it doesn't the messaging of the album, the content of the album doesn't really pair well with relationships, but so it's kind of funny in that way. But I don't know, I just remember pulling up to our driveway and listening to Supermodel, which is the intro, and there's some really like the song is just it's just her singing over just like I call it an out of tune acoustic guitar, but it's not out of tune, but it just sounds it's just like one or two chords that she just plays over and over and over again that just loops throughout the entire song. But it sounds insane. It's really coarse. It sounds really like rash, especially for like an intro of an R&B album. But like that just stuck in my head, and I just have like every time I hear the song come on, I'm just thrown back into our driveway. But anyway, so that alone in terms of nostalgia kind of carries its weight in terms of influence into my musical taste. But my favorite songs on the album, if you're interested, again, are Supermodel, Drew Barrymore, Prom, and 20 Something. In fact, Supermodel and Prom are the two songs that I listened to. I remember at this time I was still kind of getting into the habit of listening to albums in their fullest, like actually sitting down and listening to them just to experience it as an album. And I did not do it for this album at first. I remember I just kind of clicked on a song, I clicked on the intro, and it was Supermodel, and I liked it, and I was like, all right, well, let's see what another song sounds like, and I just randomly clicked on Prom. I'm like, that's an interesting song. Let's see song title. Let's see what this is about. So I clicked on Prom, and I like both of them. And I remember I sat on those songs for so long without really giving the rest of the album like a true listen. I listened to the other songs obviously, but without like a true like straight through listen and really like an in-depth listen to albums. I didn't give it that. I literally just listened to Prom and Supermodel for like so long before I gave the other songs a true chance. But yeah, those would be my 4 favorites. And the interesting thing about this list of 4 is that obviously it contains a dubstep album, 2 rap albums, and an R&B album. And I could talk more on a different episode about some of the albums that got me into each genre in a wider scope. So Control to me is the first album that I would say really turned me on to the R&B genre in terms of like this newer content, this newer sound of R&B music, especially on the female side, which I really, really, really adore. And I believe this is the first album that I really kind of took notice of that, and I really put a lot of stock into this genre of music as a whole. There's another album that I was debating on putting in, being Everlasting Love by Sabrina Claudio. And I'll save that one for a separate episode because I was already within the genre of R&B before I got into that Sabrina Claudio album. So I don't think it really deserved to be on this list as much as Control did, again, because Control was really the first time that I was really interested in R&B music, into listening to it regularly, into listening to it in any setting. And yeah, and Control, to me, is one of the most well-executed displays of, like, what I would say is progressive female R&B in terms of... Let me put it this way. Before I listened to this album, a lot of my take on R&B, especially female R&B, was that it was really like, I don't know, it was really like, like relationship heavy, like more, I don't want to say woe is me because it's kind of condescending, but the tone of a lot of music, that R&B music that I tried to get into that was going on before this, was really just kind of like sadder. It was like, like me and dude didn't really work out. Like, I want this dude back, or like, yo, fuck that nigga, or whatever else. But it all kind of sounded sad, and like it was all like, it was all to me, right? But this, it took like very interesting approaches to self-reflection and growth. It had very accurate depictions of modern relationships, which I think is what's really important to me as a listener, especially as it pertains to this album, is that an R&B as a genre is, because R&B is very, obviously it takes a lot of notes, it takes a lot of influence, it takes a lot of experiences from relationships and relationship woes and relationship troubles, relationship successes. So again, it's very relationship heavy in terms of content, R&B as a genre, or at least my take on it is. So it's very easy to find yourself. I mean, romantic relationships are very cliche, like they're meant to be cliched, right? Like every rom-com is a cliche. Like every sad song about us just breaking up tends to be a cliche. It's very easy to be a cliche. It's very easy to make a very cliche R&B song, personally. And this album did not do that at all. It really, and especially in terms of modern relationships. So I guess it would be considered her breakout single, being The Weeknd. Is the whole song is about how she knows she knows this dude, and this dude has a girlfriend, and SZA is very knowingly the side chick. So it's a side chick anthem. Definitely the first side chick anthem that I heard. And she's very aware that she's a side chick, and it's very the song is essentially about, you can get this dude on like the weekdays when he's doing like regular shit, but like, on the weekends, like, he's mine, right? Like, he's mine. I'm not really for like all the relationship shit. I'm just here for the physicality of it, for the sexuality of it. Like, this all I want this dude for, so I just need him on the weekends. You can have him back to do all like your normal relationship day-to-day shit on the weekdays, right? And I'll tell you what, man, like me as a dude, I'm sitting here like harmonizing with her about, like I'll fuck this dude on the weekend and give him right back to this girl on Monday. And it's just like funny, like, because like I just find myself just singing this all the time, and it's just funny, like, the messaging isn't for me. It's not a song for me personally, but I still like, it's just so good, and it's just so catchy, and it's just so like, the content is just so funny and amusing, and it's such an interesting take on it, because I mean, like, how many songs do you hear that are from the viewpoint of the side chick, right? I would venture to say probably none, and very few. Especially not in 2017. Not that 2017 was very long ago, but you definitely hear more of that stuff now, because it's very some a lot of people come to mind, like the City Girls, or Nicki does this kind of, and a lot of female acts do this. A lot of female acts do this now, where it's kind of, like, I'm cool being the side chick, man. I just want dude for whatever, for the money or the sex or whatever. But at the time, I really liked that kind of content. I found it very amusing, and I found it very novel. So, and that kind of novelty is littered all over this album, with some of the greatest vocals of all time. Personally, to me, you could debate that for days, but I mean, her voice, she's has an amazing voice. She is an amazing songwriter, and this album is, again, just a very good depiction of what I look for in an R&B album. And yeah, I mean, just if you're gonna listen to any of the 4 albums on this, if you haven't listened to any of these albums somehow, and you're gonna walk away with, and I want you to walk away with one of them, it would be Control. While, again, like I said, Yeezus is my favorite album of all time. It's very don't want to say it's too niche because I think that's a little that's giving myself a little bit too much credit as a music listener, but you either love it or you hate it, and it's realistically it's pretty easy to hate that album. I can't lie to you. The music is very jarring. Same goes with dubstep as a genre in general, not even just Bangarang as an album. And then, Jay-Z's Jay-Z, so. But I'm saying this to say, Control, I think, is an album that anybody can get into and anybody can love, and anybody can find songs on this album that you love. I mean, it's just good. If I'm going to recommend any single album from this list, it would be this one. However, that does not take away from the honorable mention album that everybody has heard, at least to some capacity, because that album is The Fame Monster. And if you don't know what The Fame Monster is by Lady Gaga, you do. I know you do. It's just kind of confusing because, okay, so this album was released in 2009, but it is essentially a deluxe version of her debut album being The Fame, which was released in 2008. So technically it's just a deluxe, but it has a different, quote-unquote, different name. So it contains all the same songs that are on the Fame, being of the ones that are notable, that were singles that everybody's listened to, being Just Dance, Paparazzi, Poker Face, Love Game, all those gems of songs of pop music, of middle school pop music. Also includes The Fame Monster, also includes Bad Romance, Alejandro, oh gosh, a couple others that didn't really make it to the singles because people were kind of just getting, Telephone, did I say Telephone? And Telephone, which has Beyonce. And of those, my favorite songs are all singles that everyone all knows, and I'll explain why that is later and how it ties into this being an honorable mention. But my favorite songs are Love Game off this album, are Love Game, Bad Romance, Telephone, and Paparazzi. Love Game being far and above my favorite song off this album. So I love this song so much. And I credit this song with being the first song that I ever loved. Like, I actually ever loved. Like, I listened to this song constantly. I love this song so much that I had my own dance routine to it for middle school dances. I didn't look anything up. All I did was put the song on, double tap that repeat button on iTunes that just looped it over and over and over again, and I just made my own dance routine to the chorus. Maybe if this podcast gets a little bit more, if I keep going with this podcast, maybe I'll start doing video with it, and I'll show you guys at some point. Because I still think I remember it. But yeah, I had my own little dance routine for it. For when I was prepared for when this song came on in the 5-6 gym at Fleetwood Middle School. I was fucking ready. But even with that, why I consider this album an honorable mention for my most influential albums of all time. I have said in the past that Lady Gaga got me interested in music as a whole. And that is still very true, especially in terms of this listing. It's very true. So Lady Gaga, specifically her radio singles that came out in 2008, 2009, really was really the first time that I had fun listening to music. Because, before this, you listen to music in the radio, or on the radio, you just kind of listen to it to pass time, you listen to while you're doing things, or whatever. But Lady Gaga's music was the first time that I actually, put on music, started listening to music for, fun. That was, what I was doing. That was, my activity. I am listening to music right now. That is, the sole thing that I'm doing. This is it. Lady Gaga's music was the first time that I ever did that, or the first time that I recognized that I ever did that. And even with that, it still didn't make my main four, because as an album, I didn't like any of the other songs. To this day, I even tried giving it a chance maybe a year or so ago, and maybe I should just give it a chance every once in a while just to just to revisit it, since it, the songs that I do like have such a very important meaning to me as a music listener. I feel like I owe it more listens, but I didn't like any of the other songs on either the quote unquote either the albums, which kind of holds it back in terms of the entire concept of the album, or not the concept, but the entire album as a whole piece of art that I'm consuming. The whole album did not influence me enough. It was just a select few songs. So while those songs and those pieces of music were very important, were debatably the most important, the album as a whole did not really influence my musical taste at all, if that makes sense. Which, again, I don't hold it back in hindsight, but just in terms of what I was doing here for this episode, I decided to leave it out. But still mention it because, again, without the songs that were on this album, I would probably not be doing this podcast. I would definitely not be doing this podcast right now, and I probably wouldn't be listening to the music in the capacity that I do now. But yeah, so that was my list of my 4/5 most influential albums. Again, I'll list them out here. First being Bangarang by Skrillex, second being Magna, Carta, Holy Grail by Jay-Z, third being Yeezus by Kanye West, fourth being Control by SZA, and then the honorable mention being The Fame Monster by Lady Gaga. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this listen today. I had a lot of fun. I like doing lists like this where it's just kind of why I like the music that I like. I like talking about that more because I think it's very interesting to talk about because people obviously like completely different music for completely different reasons. And lists like this I think are very interesting to make because I get to look back on the music I've listened to in the past and what really and how it affected the music I listen to now. I think that's really interesting to listen to or to create. So hopefully you guys found it interesting to listen to. And yeah, so that'll be where I'll finish this episode. I will say that as with every Thursday episode, granted this is only the second one, but with every Thursday episode, I give a brief little preview of what music I'm looking forward to that's coming out tonight. And of what I've seen, there are only a couple things I'm looking forward to. There is a new Juice WRLD album coming out tonight, and I don't know if I said it before, but I was never the biggest Juice WRLD fan as a listener. I respected his music, I respected his fans, and obviously, again, another artist that died way earlier than he should have. He had so much potential as an artist. But he has a new posthumous album coming out tonight, and I'll give it a listen, because every once in a while there's a Juice WRLD gem that I'll find and I'll like, but I wouldn't say, it's to me it's a Juice WRLD album. It's not going to be my first listen, not even close. In fact, my first listen goes to Summer Walker, whose EP, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of off the top of my head, but that is going to be my first spin tonight, and I am looking forward to it so much. Her last album that came out last year in 2019 was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. One of the best R&B albums I've listened to in a while. One of the best albums of the past year. And yeah, R&B artist. I'm not sure if I said that. Yeah, R&B album. But really awesome, really great new R&B act coming out of, oh gosh, what label is she, or what team is she signed to? She and actually Black are on the same label, and then someone else I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, go check that out. If you're a Summer Walker fan, if you're an R&B fan, definitely check out that EP tonight coming out. I'm not sure how many songs it is, but I'm sure as an EP it's going to be short. I'm assuming 6 or 7 songs. But Summer Walker's on a hot streak right now. She had a couple really good features and really good appearances after her album last year, so I'm really looking forward to hearing her tonight. And then I was mistaken last week. I said that another really great R&B artist, Snow Allegra, is releasing an EP, and I was mistaken. It is just, in fact, a single that's coming out tonight, but I'm also looking forward to that too. She released a little snippet of it, and I am excited to say the least. But yeah, with that, I will leave you guys. I hope you guys enjoy the episode, and I will see you guys on Monday.